This is Jay Richards. I'm at the COSM 2019 conference with Discovery Institute, and we're joined by Steve Forbes. Probably needs no introduction, of course, the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Inc. Forbes magazine has been in the publishing business, of course, for decades, and longtime friend of George Gilder's, has done conferences together. But Steve just joined George and several other people to talk about blockchain and the future of money. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Well, so blockchain and money, every time there's a discussion, I think, I think I get this, and then somebody says something, George usually says something, and I lose it. It's like sand falls between my fingers. I mean, how would you distill the discussion and this wide-ranging discussion in the panel this afternoon?
Well, you should look at cryptocurrencies as a high-tech cry for help, the instability of government printed money today. And what blockchain does is simply provide the architecture for these cryptocurrencies. The flaw of the cryptocurrency so far is the lack of stability.
Right.
You take Bitcoin. One day you have steak, the next day dog food. You wouldn't dare do a long-term contract. So cryptocurrencies have performed short-term services of getting resources to places like Venezuela, Syria, and other things, but it hasn't achieved stability. That'll eventually will happen, and when it does, the governments are going to be very, very upset because they're not going to be able to play with the people's money the way they have in the past. People will have an alternative.
Well, you know, George actually in the panel admitted, he said, Steve was right about Bitcoin in particular. So apparently at one point you disagreed about Bitcoin, and I think he thought it had more prospects than you did.
Well, the challenge with Bitcoin was they made the mistake of thinking if they restricted the supply of it, that would create value. And not realizing what creates value is trust and using Bitcoin as a means of buying and selling with each other. In the panel we cited the Swiss franc.
Right.
The Swiss franc, if you look at the size of the Swiss economy and look at the Swiss money supply, you'd say, my God, Switzerland is as bad as Venezuela. Huge money supply. The reason the money supply is high and the Swiss franc is valuable because the Swiss have demonstrated over the past 100 years that they can produce a trustworthy currency. They've kept their purchasing power better than any other currency in the world since World War I. So people trust it, so they want it. And when people want something, the supply goes up. Well, Bitcoin artificially restricts the supply, creates a shortage of money, whereas the normal functioning money, if people need more of it, it increases. Money facilitates commerce. Money doesn't control an economy. Money facilitates people buying and selling with each other.
So this is, I mean, at the bottom then, it's a kind of philosophical confusion on the part of Bitcoin. It's like they sort of bought the monetarist assumption about the nature of money in an economy. Is that it?
Yes, they thought if you make it rare, it makes it useful. No, if it's too rare, it then becomes an impediment to commerce. You hold on to the money rather than using it as a way of buying and selling and investing. So if you do the money right, you can have an infinite supply. You look at the US dollar from 1775, or after the American Revolution, between then and when we became the greatest industrial country in the world in the late 1800s, the money supply in the US went up about 150-fold, even though the gold supply only went up 3-fold. Well, the dollar was fixed to gold. Gold, in this sense, is like a measuring stick, a measuring rod, a ruler. And as we said on the panel, having 12 inches in a foot no more restricts the size of a building you may wish to construct. It just means that the building has set measures of how you measure the thing.
Yeah, and so I mean, what do you see about the future of money? I mean, George has this idea that he proposes in which we're going to have a future in which there's some kind of cryptocurrency, presumably, but it's, again, tied to gold. I'm never quite sure that I grasp what he's talking about. I mean, what's your vision of the future?
What he's looking for, what we're all looking for, is a currency that maintains a stable value, like the dollar did for 180 years, pound did for 200 years when it was fixed to gold. It just means that it has a fixed value. And just like 60 minutes in an hour, you don't let that float. 16 ounces in a pound, you don't have that float. You can float the British pound, but not the pound of cheese or a pound of hamburger meat. So it just means stability. And the key thing is having that trust and also making it easy to use. Cash is easy to use. Credit cards are easy to use. And so cryptocurrencies have to be extremely easy, frictionless to use. whether it's buying something, investing in something, moving it around. And you look at the payment system today,
right.
It's a very, very cumbersome. You try to transfer money to Canada or our neighbor.
Yes, Canada of all places.
It's an ordeal going through a bank. If you get a check from Canada in Canadian dollars and try to deposit in an American bank, oh my goodness, all the stuff you have to go through. It's ridiculous.
Well, what do you, I mean, that sort of, that points to the kind of regulatory climate that we're in. I mean, are you optimistic that we're going to find a solution with cryptocurrency?
We see eventually with all the brain power that's being applied to it,
yes.
Somebody will do it. Maybe it'll be Facebook with Libra. Maybe Amazon will invent the Bezos or something like that.
Right.
And if people find it's easy to use and trustworthy, they'll use it. But it won't be with permission from the government. Just as you would never have gotten taxi cartels to say, oh yeah, let's try Lyft or Uber.
Yeah, right.
No, not going to happen. You just go and do it. A good example, going back, money funds today have tens of trillions of dollars. They were invented in the early 1970s through technology,
right.
which provided an alternative to parking your money in a bank. The banks didn't like it, but it was done. Technology happened. And the politicians couldn't stop it.
Well, I love the Uber example, because in some ways Uber was very smart to open up early on in Washington, D.C., where I live. And by the time the regulators realized that we should do something about that, they were all using Uber. They'd had to go back to using Metro if they had regulated it out of existence. So essentially, you think that someone will sort of crack this problem. Someone will solve the problem that Bitcoin didn't quite solve, but they really just need to ask forgiveness rather than permission.
You just go and do it, and then deal with the aftermath. And we're talking about Bitcoin. If you'd taken a mortgage out, say for $300,000 5 years ago in Bitcoin, you'd owe the bank today $10 million. Wow. It just doesn't work, that kind of volatility. But somebody will figure it out, and when they do, governments are going to be very upset. They're going to try to quash it, just as they continue to try to quash B&B. They try to quash Uber. They try to quash Lyft.
Yep.
The banks initially try to quash money funds, but eventually technology will prevail.
Well, let's turn just briefly to your relationship with George Gilder. George has been a longtime friend of mine. You've, of course, been working with him for decades. The first COSM conference that I went to was in 1998. It was this famous conference, and of course, George spoke. That was when Ray Kurzweil spoke, and Bill Joy of Sun Microsystems wrote a famous piece on the cover of Wired magazine, worried about nanotechnology and all these things. But so you've been in the ferment of this discussion about technology and the economy for decades. I mean, what's stayed the same over the decades in some of these conferences, the things that are being talked about, and what's different about this particular conference and what folks are talking about in the last couple of years?
The difference is, thanks to evolution, thanks to progress, there are new subjects to focus on. And then you talk about doing things without permission, the rise of the internet. There are some, as George discussed, some very real flaws with it, very real challenges. And so you deal with them. Progress does not come without challenges and without price. But we'd prefer the progress and deal with the aftermath than still be living in caves.
Absolutely.
And I first got to know George abstractly when he wrote Wealth and Poverty. I got to know him personally as we did a newsletter together and some other things, conferences and all that sort of thing. So we've been long-term admirers of George. He's got an original mind, and a very fresh mind, which is always in short supply.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to join us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
This is Jay Richards at the Discovery Institute, and we're at COSM 2019.